Hello everyone, welcome. My name is MJ Pestridge. Welcome to continuation of the hardware series. In today's video we're going to be looking at the RAM or the memory, how to optimize it for your PC, how to get the most out of it. And it doesn't really matter which flight simulator you're using, it all kind of works the same, and it doesn't really matter what other hardware you've got in your system. RAM operates in exactly the same way for a flight sim, which is basically the flight sim will utilize your RAM to store information within it for a short period of time and then be recalled at a later down the road for quick access. This could be scenery or scenery objects, so it doesn't really matter what, it's just data at the end of the day that's being stored and then recalled upon later for fast access. And RAM stands for random access memory. So that's basically what your RAM does in your flight sim. But what is exactly RAM specifically? It's a storage device for quick access of data. Then there are different types of RAM you can buy. You can get DDR3, DDR4, and DDR5. Each one being compatible with a certain type of motherboard and CPU. So when you go RAM shopping, make sure you look at your CPU and what it's capable of handling, and your motherboard and what it'll go in. If you just go out and buy like, oh, I'm going to get the fastest and the quickest, you might find that your hardware actually can't run that. So you have to really make sure your current hardware can run the new RAM you're putting in. Now the RAM goes into the motherboard. It has 4 slots, which is split up in the first 2 slots are a channel A and the second 2 slots are channel B. So whenever you're putting RAM into a PC, for anybody who doesn't know, you must always put them in pairs, and one will go in channel A slot in either of the 2 slots and the other one will go in the channel B slot in either of the 2 slots. And you want to make sure that your memory is equal to each other. So if you go out and get 3200 megahertz of RAM, DDR4, make sure you've got 2 sticks exactly the same type. But what type can you get? Well, they come in different flavors. You can get like 2 gig, 4 gig, 8 gig, 16 gig, 32 gig sticks, and you'll be wanting to put 2 in at a time. Of course, if you maximize your motherboard, which it can only in itself hold so much RAM, make sure you find that out as well. You're going to be using all 4 slots. So make sure all that memory is of the same type, of the same speed, and of the same make. So if you're using DDR3 or 4, make sure you're going to cover all DDR3 and 4. Do not mix and match. Make sure the speeds are all the same and they are all of the same type in terms of how big they are. It's very easy for your RAM actually to be the cause of problems within your PC, and to where your PC actually won't boot up. So in this video I'm going to show you how you can actually optimize your RAM to get the most out of it and the best availability for your flight sim. How much RAM does a flight sim require? Well, it's kind of debated because most developers will tell you 8 gig is plenty, and it is possible with 8 gig of RAM. I would never recommend running 8 gig of RAM for a flight sim. My personal suggestion is 16 gig as a minimum, and then going up to whatever your motherboard can support. And you might as well max out your motherboard, in all honesty, to future proof yourself. So if you're looking to go get some more RAM, just get 4 sticks of whatever your motherboard can take, and then you don't have to worry about it until your next PC build. But buying, like, say 2 sticks now and I'll get them another 2 sticks further down the line is, to be honest, kind of pointless. You might as well just max it out now, and then you don't have to worry about it, and you can save your money for other things. Because like I said, 16 gig is the minimum I would say that a PC wants to run on with flight simulation. Flight simulation is very intensive on your hardware. The better hardware you have, the less problems you're going to face in the sim. And in my personal experience, P3D, say V5 or 6, 16 gig is a minimum, and I mean, I think even 32 could be classed as a minimum these days, but in the Microsoft Flight Sim as well, 16 or 32 is preferred as a minimum, and then going up to 128 from there. But like I said, check your motherboards first to make sure what it can take. So how can we optimize our memory? Before I tell you, I just want to tell you a story of what happened to me years ago. I was cleaning out my PC, and I was changing out the radiator, so I was cleaning that out as well. And when I put everything back together again, my PC would not turn on, and it's because I'd actually damaged one of the two slots in the B channel of my memory without even realizing. If you're not careful when you're fiddling with your PCs, you can actually short out your motherboard, and you will never know it until you go and try and turn on your PC. When this happened to me, one of my two channels in the B slot actually broke, and I had to basically only use one stick. And so I bought a 32 gig stick, put it in channel A and like slot A or B or 1 or 2, I can't remember which it was, and then the PC booted up. One thing to note is your PC, when you add your new sticks of RAM, if you're adding 4 new sticks in fresh, you might need to boot your PC up and then shut it down immediately and then boot it up again, because your motherboard has a battery of memory, and the configuration of your RAM can be stored in that battery of memory. Now, if you're swapping out your RAM completely, when you reboot up your PC will be thinking it's booting up the old memory still, and then suddenly you can't get your PC to start. And so restarting the PC, it will recognize the new RAM and then probably head into the BIOS to set your RAM up, because if you don't do that, then your PC might not ever load, and you'll think it's because of dodgy RAM, but in actual fact, it's your motherboard still thinking you've got the old stuff in and you haven't reset the new stuff. I'll show you how to do all that in a second, but I thought it's just worth mentioning because it's a problem that's not really a problem, but then you might throw out RAM that is actually perfectly good. And if you ever do fall into a position where you're only using one stick of RAM, which obviously is never advisable, but I actually ran one stick of RAM for like a year and a half in flight simulation and never had that much of an issue. I got a 32 gig stick, which sadly, if you only ever run one stick of RAM, it will only use half of its resources. So one stick of 32 gig became one stick of 16 gig for any application, and that's how I kind of ran my setup for like over a year. So it's not preferred, but you know, it is what it is. Until I swapped out my motherboard, basically the issue would have never been fixed. But anyway, let's have a look at how we can set up our RAM. So if we look here at like the memory I've got here at the moment, it's got 64 gig. It's running at this clock speed of 3200 megahertz, and I've got 4 slots of 4 used. Now, basically, this motherboard that I've got, I think, is a 128 gig motherboard, so I could effectively double my RAM if I wanted to take advantage fully of the motherboard. But in all honesty, 64 gig of RAM is plenty for flight sim. It's never going to use it all, but one thing that will build up the more you use it is this cached RAM. Which at the moment it's 724 megabytes, but this thing can go all the way up to like 25 gig. Now this cached memory is actually stored on your hard drive here. So if I let it run up to like 30 gig, there would be only 39 gig available on my hard drive, because this cached is actually stored on the disk drive somewhere, not sort of building up in your own memory. Now I have a little optimizer tool that basically clears this cached memory every 15 minutes, because this can eat your hard drive space up, and it won't actually reset until you restart your PC. So you could then suddenly turn your PC on and find, whoa, hang on, where's all this free space I suddenly had? I didn't realize I had like 50 gig of free space, and now I've got like 80 gig of free space, and it's because it's been used by your memory. So one thing I do is, and I'll put a link to the video in the description box below, but if you run to your task scheduler, there is basically a memory cycle dump that I do, a memory clean, every 15 minutes, and I've set this up to run. I think it just actually came on before, but if I run it now, let's see here, we've got 497 megabytes, and if I suddenly run this, it would actually delete that down to 200 something. And the benefit of this for flight simulation is so not only hard drive space is cleared, but also there's less chance of memory corruption. Because if any of the files in here get corrupted and then are recalled again, because cached information is just temporary information, if it gets recalled and it's errored or corrupted, that could actually bring down your sim. Like, you suddenly could get a freeze and then your sim would crash the desktop and you'd be like, whoa, what happened then? Nothing happened. And it could be that your cached memory files just got corrupted. So I keep this at a minimum at all times. There's only one instance that I know of where this actually is not a benefit, and that is if you use the FS Labs planes in P3D. They actually use the cached memory area to use for their displays. So if you clear this off, your displays go blank. So that's a bit of a rip on that one. But for everything else, this actually helps keep a stable system. So it's one thing I do. Which another thing I don't do is overclock my memory. I don't really recommend overclocking full stop, but memory is memory and it's got a set speed of safe usability. And if you exceed that and introduce more power, not only are you heating up your PC unnecessarily, but you have more chance to fail, because manufacturers have these recommendations for a reason. This is the safe operating speed. Yes, it can go higher, but then you're charting into unknown territory and it's like, you know, you're on your own, mate. And so if we're talking about keeping a sim stable, then keeping everything running at its base speed is absolutely a must. But one thing you can do, let's say if this was 2800 megahertz of memory, right, or 2600, say, you can actually go one above very safely without having to introduce any extra power to it. So in your BIOS, you'll see that memory, you have a lot of options depending on how much speed you want to push your memory to. And let's say if I had 2600 megahertz of memory, I could go to the next one up, which would be like 2800 or even 3000, because one up from the manufacturer's recommendations is really nothing in terms of giving it that extra power, but actually could help you your memory be a little bit faster in a safe way, basically. So overclocking to extreme lengths, you know, you don't really need anything more than 3000 megahertz when dealing with flight simulation. That 3000 megahertz is absolutely fine. That is fast enough to recall information, to not have lag or stutters be present in your sim. Because at the end of the day, if your memory is absolute crap, but the rest of your PC is great, then things can hang because your memory isn't fast enough to keep up with the other hardware. So make sure that whatever memory you've got in your system, that it's kind of like on the same level speed-wise as your GPU and your CPU. Because if it isn't, then you could actually introduce stutters or lag into your flight sim without realizing. So buying the right type of RAM, not really overclocking in it, and making sure it's running at a safe temperature are things that are a must to keep it stable, and keeping it compatible with other hardware as well. Now, if you're not loaded and you're not a rich person and you've only got 8 gig of RAM in your PC, but you've got like 200 gig of hard drive space, there is actually a neat little trick you can do to give yourself more RAM for free, which is if you go into the display and the about section. Where's it go? On the right hand side here in your about section, go to advanced system settings and this menu will pop up. In the performance section, you can go to advanced, you can go to virtual memory and actually set a paging file for your memory. Now let's say if you have got 2 sticks of 8 gig, 16 gig, but you know what, you want more. So you've got 16 gig. So we need to bring up the calculator because we need to calculate exactly how much that is. So 1 gig is 0, 1, 2, 4. So if you times that by 16, this is how much in numbers your memory is, 16,384. So coming down here, making sure it's on the C drive, go to custom size, type in 16384, and then times that number by 4 to give you its maximum size, which is 65,536, and then click set. Now what you've just done is turned a 8 gig stick into a potential 65 gig stick, because what happens when you exceed your memory of 8 gig, it uses the hard drive space that's available on the PC as exactly in the same way as your memory does. But the only thing is, it might be slightly slower because SSDs or even M2 drives don't run it at the same speed as a memory does. So it gives you extra memory, but it will be slightly slower. So it's a neat little trick if you want to give yourself some free memory. Now I personally, don't want to do this, so I'm just going to reset that back, because the system managed size, I've got enough memory basically. I don't need to worry about that. So only do that if you're low on memory and you can't really afford to buy it. You can actually use your hard drive to create it, and that will actually help. But because temperature is the most important thing in your PC. If you over temp your PC, it's going to fail more likely and crash your sim or be laggy for your sim. Keeping your temperature in your PC is very important, and the RAM can actually generate heat as well, especially if you go into the overclocking world. You are bringing more heat into your PC, which you have to account for. It's easy to tell your power unit to just provide more power, but if your RAM sticks are melting, and you haven't got the cooling in there, then it's no good really. But in the BIOS section, there is a section which you can introduce more power to your RAM sticks. Like I said before, only the next level up. Don't go any higher. As easy as it is to click a button, it's so even easier to not be able to fix it if you suddenly short circuit your PC. So only one higher, and make sure that the motherboard, there are settings in your motherboard to allow for like an auto configuration, right, on your memory. I recommend sticking with the defaults on the motherboard, because if you change them, you're going into uncharted territory. And in all honesty, motherboards actually are quite nifty, and they give you loads of options for setup, but the defaults at which they run at are actually quite optimized. So make sure your firmware for your motherboard is up to date, and make sure that you are giving your memory enough power, but not so much where you're melting those sticks or causing those sticks to fail. And that's about it. Like, literally, memory is probably the easiest thing to maintain on your PC, because if you set it up right, it just works. And if it doesn't work, it can actually, you'll notice the difference. There is no, I would say, real advantage to having memory over 3 megahertz. Like, I've seen somebody have memory at 6 megahertz, man. That's like insane, because now you're making your memory faster than your GPU and your CPU combined. So it's going to be waiting on them now. Like, all your hardware in your PC should be of the equal same sort of performance level. If you have one, like the CPU is better than your GPU, you're bottlenecking your PC. And it's exactly the same for the memory. If you get super fast memory but you haven't got the other components to keep up, then you are bottlenecking your PC. And this is what memory is designed to do. Like, the more memory you have, the more other processes, right, you can run and still have good performance. Like, the more plate spinning your PC can do, basically. That's the only real benefit to having loads of RAM. And in Flight Simulation, we have so many apps that run at the same time. They're all taking CPU cycles, they're all using the memory, and so the more memory you have, the more it can be allocated out to these applications. So I definitely recommend always maxing out whatever your motherboard can take. You can easily check the specs on a website and then just, buy it. Memory is actually quite cheap. It's not that expensive. But when you go and buy it, make sure that you're buying the appropriate RAM type. The speeds are all the same and the size is all the same. And that's about it, guys. Anyway, thank you so much for watching and listening to this video. In the next video, we're going to be looking at storage space and the different types and how you can optimize that as well. And don't forget, I run a giveaway every single month on my channel. €50 I give away of Sim Market vouchers. To be in with a chance to win, all you have to be is a subscriber on my channel. Leave a comment down below in any one of my Flight Sim videos, and at the end of every single month I go live with a vlog and announce the giveaway winner. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care. Bye bye.